All right, so hey, how many times has a service member told you, I'm just going to wait to buy when I get back to where I'm from, or PCS to some other duty station? How often have you heard that?
A lot of times, right? Just really depends on the scenario. Some people don't want to stay here in California, or they're like, oh, I want to buy a house in this market because it's cheaper.
So most of these guys and girls are not thinking, okay, my BAH is, what's the average, like 3,500, say 3,600. My house payment's 4,500 or would be. Then they're never really thinking, all right, I'm just going to deal with that extra $500, $600 disparity. Is that, are most guys and girls not okay with that?
I think that's the big one. A lot of them aren't okay with that and
are not okay with it.
They don't want to do the disparity, because a lot of times when you, especially that market that you do come into, is that $3,500. I honestly don't hear it from those, because the $3,500 a month BAH is usually from junior enlisted. So like E4 and below, those guys were like, I'm gonna stay in California forever, so I have no issues. It's the senior ones that are like, I'm gonna PCS back to North Carolina, and that's when I want to buy a house. And you know, they think that they're gonna PCS in 3 years, and then they end up being here for 6 years and missing out on opportunities, right?
How have you historically, I mean, I know you can't force anybody. How have you historically helped them look at it from the other perspective of, okay, go ahead and come out of pocket $500, $600, $700 a month, just because by the time you leave here 3 years, 4 years from now, you would have, quote unquote, made that money back and then some. Is that a dangerous game to play? Or how have you had that conversation? Or are you even having that conversation?
I have, and it's really just about showing them the data of, hey, this is what happens in 4 years, right? And kind of showing them the numbers, because a lot of these guys are, you know, they need to have something visual. So putting down the numbers of, hey, this is where you're at. You buy a house right now. This is what your payment would be. In 3 years when you PCS, this is how much you owe. And based on current market trends, this is what your house will be worth. So worst case situation is you will break even. Best case situation is you'll walk away with $10, $15, $20,000 or even more. So it's really just kind of breaking the numbers down for them.
I like what you're saying. So basically, are you getting visual and you're saying, okay, look, here's your amortization, right? You may not want to use that word, but it showed them the amortization of, if you just made your regular monthly payment after 36 payments or 48 payments, here's how much you owe on the property, right?
Correct.
And then you pick a conservative appreciation and show what the property will be worth at the same time and look at the difference. Is that what?
Correct.
Does that work to people?
It has.
Okay.
Then they see it, and you know, a lot of times, some people, there's certain ones that just want to do it for comfort, right? So my biggest obstacle that I've faced really is not necessarily about the payments. It's, you know, it's a comfortability, right? People want to live on base because they can just roll out of bed and get to work in 10 minutes.
You mean the convenience?
The convenience, yeah. They just want to be comfortable. Living on base is more convenient and comfortable for them. There's other people that see the bigger picture of what can happen in the real estate market whenever you do, you know, you can rent it out or whatever. It's just, I think it's a lack of education that really drives that.
You know, I like what you're saying, man, because that is so true. Huh? There's, you know, we've, as you know, and you've done the classes, I've done some classes on base, off base, and for some of them, there's this aha moment where the lights just come on. They're like, bam. And then the very next week, they want to close on a home, right? And all this time, they haven't thought that way. It just took someone to show it to them. But then there's others that it feels like you're never going to get through. They're always going to just stay on base or letting that BAH come through and go back to DOD, right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's some people are going to get that aha moment. It took me 6 years to get it whenever I first got to California. So, because I lived on base for the first 3 years, I was stationed on Camp Halton, and I ended up being here for 6 years. So if I would have bought a house in 2010 instead of 13, then it would have just been so much better. And just kind of really understanding that, because at the end of the day, right, when you get here for your 3-year mark, a lot of the ones that are negative about buying a house here in California is the ones that are like, I'm not staying in California. They're really negative about the place until they get here and realize how much they really like it. And they're like, oh man, I should have bought a house a few years ago. And then, because I've turned Marines down from buying houses just because of understanding how the military work. It's like, hey, how long have you been here? Oh, I've been here 1.5 years. Like by the time we do a pre-approval and actually go start house shopping and everything, you'll have like a year left, give or take, maybe like a year and a few months left before you have to leave. So if you find a house right now, anticipating leaving, I don't think it's a good financial decision, because then that's when you get in the negative. But if you actually take advantage of it when you first get here and use those 3 years to the maximum potential, then it's almost, I would say it's a 95% win scenario.
Why did it take you 6 years to make a decision to buy a house after you moved to Camp Pendleton or wherever you went to?
So it took me 3 years after I got to Camp Pendleton. It took me 6 years in the Marine Corps before I bought my first house.
Why? What was your why?
Like I didn't know any better.
Did anyone come at you during that time and say, hey, you should buy a house, you should use your BAH? Nobody.
Nope. And I've been doing military. I was doing military for 5 of those years, because I got married my first 1.5 years in the Marine Corps. My wife, we were both Lance Corporals together, so it wasn't an income issue. And then I was stationed in a cheap market, so if I'd have really bought a house in South Carolina, in Beaufort at the time, that would have been perfect. So
let me ask you this, even now, right? I mean, there's so much more information on the internet, there's so much more than there was even 5-6 years ago. Do you still feel like, by and large, a lot of not just Marines, but service members are still not getting that voice of reason, that it usually, not always, usually makes sense to take that BAH and shift it over to an actual ownership? Are they not getting that message still?
I think they are. Honestly, the ones that you're probably going to run into the most issues with when it comes to purchasing are now the senior enlisted that is like, I'm going to retire in 3 years and I'm leaving California, so I'm going to wait before I buy a house. But like the younger generation, they have a mentality of, I don't want to work for anyone anymore. And a lot of them understand that the fastest way to financial freedom is through real estate. They're trying to find the quickest way to do it, right? Like I just closed on my youngest couple ever. They're both 20 years old. Matter of fact, she turned 21 last week.
Okay.
Closed on their house. And
what kind of conversation did you have with them? They're active duty, I take it, right?
Yes, they're both active duty.
So what kind of conversations did you have with them? What fears did they voice, about taking on a price? I mean, presumably out here, what, 500, 600? What was the purchase price?
It was like $589.
Okay, so that's a big monthly nut.
Yeah, so the conversation I really had with them is I put myself in their shoes, right? I really sat down and asked them what their plans were with the military, because they were both corporals. So I wanted to know, what's your plan over the next year? Do you plan on staying in the Marine Corps? Are you planning on getting out? Are you going to do an STA? Like, what's your plan? And kind of once they told me what their plan was, that's when we kind of said, oh, okay, so you have an intentions to stay here for a while. So let's talk about the numbers. Once we kind of broke down all the numbers and was able to find them a situation that fits perfectly for them, right? These clients, we were able to get them a 2-1 buy down, so which worked out perfectly for them, because now they're like, oh, we're corporals, my BAHs, next year when it goes up, I will be a sergeant, so it's going to match. So it was just kind of figure out a plan and making sure it kind of fits in that bubble. That way they're not, financially poor or house poor.
You did have the affordability conversation.
Yes.
Because the last thing you want is they wake up a couple months later and go, hey, Ronaldo, we can't afford the house. And now you're going to look bad, right? They're going to be in your pickle. So you did go there with them.
Yeah. So, and I try to do that with all my clients, especially working with these young military guys. A lot of times when they don't know, their parents don't know. Like in my situation, my mom didn't buy a house until I was 2016. So I was already in the Marine Corps for 9 years when my mom bought her first house, and I'm the youngest child, so I've been gone for 9 years before she really bought a house. So there's not a lot she could educate me on. So a lot of times those are the scenarios that we kind of run into, is like these kids don't buy a house because their parents don't know. So the key is to educate them, but also don't go into it with a situation where it's to feed your own pockets. It's like, they're young. Like, I get it, you can make mistakes young and you can recover, but you don't want, if you can avoid a mistake, why not help them avoid it? So I think the key is just having that conversation and making sure that they understand what they're getting into and explaining everything to them. Even now, like, they've closed for 2 weeks, I'm still reaching out to them, kind of explaining everything, and I'm going to continue that.
And they're 20 years old.
Yes.
You know, it's actually an interesting thing. I almost feel like it's something that you said earlier, that a lot of the younger enlisted are seeing the wealth building paths maybe a lot clearer than, you know, those guys and girls that are in their 30s and 40s and being in the Marine Corps or being in the service for 10, 15 years. Is that because there's more knowledge out there on the internet and they're getting more?
I think, one, that there's more knowledge out there on the internet. And the other two is their younger generation are risk takers, right? When you're older,
yeah,
you get set in a certain way and you're like, I'm not taking that risk. I don't want to take that risk. I haven't done it. I'm comfortable and I want to stay comfortable.
It's kind of crazy. You found a scenario that works for these young first-time home buyers, 20 years old, that's not putting them in a financial bind here in Southern California. And you know, when they, not if, but when they PCS out of here or whatever, the chances are they are going to have some equity and they're going to have some options when they leave, right? I mean, that would be terrible if they didn't have any options when they leave. Like, what are their options in, say, 3 years from now, they get orders to Camp Lejeune or somewhere? What are their options in 3 years?
So in 3 years, I got it to the point where, one, their mortgage is going to stay a rentable rate.
Oh, okay, okay.
That's what I'm looking for as well, is like, what does this house rent for in this current market based on current market rent? So I'm looking at 3 years out based on just regular data, right? And I tell them, I'm like, hey, right now, the market rent in this area for a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom house is $3,500. Let's say the national average rent goes up anywhere between 5 to 7% annually. Mm-hmm. So in 3 years, the rent on this house should be roughly $4,000 a month. So in worst case situation, their mortgage at the end of their 2-1 buy down is going to be $4,200. Worst case situation, you're going to lose about $200-300 if you want to hold on to the property. And I'm also looking at the progression of the market in that area, because it's growing at a rapid rate. Your house is going to be worth about $40,000 to $50,000 more than what you purchased it for. Because a lot of times what people aren't putting into the factor when they're selling these young Marines houses, the funding fee. So I'm buying this house for $600,000, but they're paying $618,000. I put that in, and also, this is something that I personally do, but I'm not overcharging these young clients for listing their house, especially when they bought it through me. It's like, hey, you already bought it through me. So for veterans, like, I'm listing their house for 2%, and that's just really to cover the basic cost of like what I'm paying for photos, marketing, and I'm making a little bit of money, but it's really
let me ask you, not to interrupt you, but just in closing, what's coming into their LES, the BAH, presumably this is a dual military couple, right? They wouldn't see any of that money living on base housing, right? They won't get any of it.
They would see part of it.
A part of it, okay.
So the way dual military couple works is base housing. So whoever the senior member is, like for instance, in my situation when I was on base, my wife and I both were, I was a sergeant, she was a corporal. So base housing took my BH and she kept hers. So we still had a decent amount of extra income coming in on top of our base pay.
The reason I ask you is, how did that conversation go? Because if they're like getting, say, $500 a month out of that BAH, and they could go do whatever with it, right? Go eat out, go entertainment, whatever. And now presumably that is gone, right? Well, they're not going to get at it. Was that challenging to have that realization.
They weren't getting it before because they're giving it to base health.
Say the BAH is $3,500, right? For one person. Are you saying that they wouldn't see any of that $3,500 living on base housing?
No, they wouldn't.
Are you saying that they would see $500 out of the $3,500 they could do whatever with?
No, the senior member is going to get BAH with dependents if they have a dependent, and the other member is going to get BAH on right, which is going to be about $800 to $900 less.
I got you.
I believe it's 35 and like 28. That's the difference.
Yeah.
I still get that extra 28 from the other member. One of the biggest obstacles that I've had with like young Marines, because I work with majority of Marines that I've had that are dual military, is they're still living independent as a married couples, right? So my bank account is mine and your bank account is yours, and that's where they come into the mix, because now the husband's buying video games and the wife is ordering on Amazon and they don't know, and that's where they come into the financial issue. So what I told them is, you both get BH and you both get your base pay. Your BH is $3,500, his BH is $2,800, and I do the math, that's $6,300 a month. So that means on the first of every month, you guys need to create a joint bank account and put $3,000 into this account and say, this is our bills account. On the 15th, you put another $3,000. Whatever you have left over is your base pay that you do whatever you want with. But every month, you guys should be contributing to this bills account. And what that does is create that so that way they never run into any financial situation. And it's like, it doesn't matter if your bills are $5,000 this month and you have $1,300 left over, leave the $1,300 in there and continue to save and do whatever. So
in closing, well, I keep saying that all the time. In closing, okay, we're in Southern California, right? Temecula, down to San Diego, whatever. What is a reasonable annual appreciation that you could safely talk about with service members without being dishonest, right? You got to put a disclaimer out there. Hey, your house is going to go up 20%. Well, we all know that ain't going to happen. It could happen. It has happened in the recent past, but you can't tell someone, yeah, you're going to buy a house today for $500, it's going to be worth $800 in a year. So what is a reasonable appreciation, historically backed by data, that you could comfortably have a conversation with a service member and say, you buy this house today for $600, it's probably going to be worth this in a year and this in 2 years. And,
I always go between 3 to 6%. Because it just really depends on inflation and everything else, right? I don't use my own personal scenario because I bought my house in a weird time in the world where it just skyrocketed 25-30%.
Okay, so check it out. I just did 600,000 times 4.5%, right? It's kind of halfway between the 3 and the 6. That's $27,000 a year. Is that reasonable? So a house that you bought today for 600, a year from now, could you list it at 627?
If the market continued to progress the way it's supposed to, yes.
Okay, so 627, because we're talking compounding, right? 627 times 4.5%, that's 28,000. So in 2 years, it's selling for 655,000, right? Yeah. So worst case, they're probably going to get back at least the monthly payments they'd be making, whereas if they want base housing, they're not going to get jack.
Correct.
All right. Hey, good work, man. I appreciate you giving me some insight. Everybody, I hope you got something out of it. Ronaldo Wilson, I wanted to ask him because he served, and so he had to deal with this, conversation before, right? Yourself, you had to think about this when you were active duty. Should every active service member buy a house as early as they can in their career? Yes or no? You waited 6 years. That's a long time. You forfeited 6 years worth of appreciation, presumably, right?
I think everyone, if you have the opportunity to buy real estate early, you should, right? Do I think every active duty service member should? Because I was active duty and I understand, I don't think everyone has the maturity to do it, should do it, but you have the capability to. If you are mentally mature enough to handle it, I think you should.
Okay, let me come at it from this.
So, I'll answer your question, yes.
Yes.
Yes, you should.
Is there any reason why, say I just got in, I'm an E3, for example, right? And I've got a spouse or significant others, and there's 2 income households. and I can afford it wherever, we're talking here in Southern California. This could be Beaufort, South Carolina. It doesn't matter where you are. If they can afford it, that's the question I should ask. If they can afford it, should they buy? Yes or no?
100%.
Thank you. And thank you for your service. Guys, if you want more information, hit this guy up. Ronaldo Wilson, numbers on the screen. I'm over here too if you want to reach out to me. Thank you, sir. Enjoy your day.
All right.
Okay.